Bad idea detected. Welcome to Dumbora.
Some people build wealth through genius. Others trip over stupidity and land in money. 1. In 1998, a guy in North Carolina sat down at his clunky beige computer intending to buy a few shares of a budget airline. Nothing glamorous, just a safe, boring investment. The financial equivalent of khakis. Unfortunately, early online trading platforms were built with all the user-friendliness of a microwave programmed by NASA, and he accidentally purchased $5,000 worth of shares in a tiny company with a nearly identical ticker symbol. Instead of affordable flights, he'd unknowingly invested in a bankrupt tech firm that sounded like it sold fax machines to ghosts. Naturally, he panicked, considered telling no one, and decided to leave it alone out of pure embarrassment, the strongest force in human history. Then the dot-com bubble inflated like a financial parade balloon, and his accidental stock became one of Wall Street's hottest absurdities. Within months, his typo had exploded into nearly $780,000. While experts preach strategy, diversification, and market analysis, this man essentially got rich because he clicked the wrong button and was too ashamed to fix it. Sometimes wealth management is just weaponized confusion. 2. One woman became rich because she was aggressively bad at cleaning. In the 1970s, a widow in California kept stuffing spare cash into random household items because she didn't trust banks, which honestly sounds paranoid. Until you remember banks do occasionally collapse wearing expensive suits. She hid money in books, soup cans, old shoes, and, for reasons known only to her generation, inside a lumpy second-hand couch. Years later, after she passed, her nephew inherited that hideous floral sofa, the kind of furniture that looks like it lost a fight with wallpaper. He nearly tossed it, but while moving it, he noticed the cushions felt suspiciously heavy, like they were filled with regret. Inside, over $1.2 million in cash, bonds, and certificates stuffed into the upholstery like Depression-era lasagna. This man didn't build a startup, invent an app, or hustle crypto. He got rich because grandma turned her living room into Fort Knox and had terrible taste in furniture. IKEA sells storage solutions. Grandma preferred upholstery-based capitalism. 3. In 2004, a janitor in Boston bought an old painting at a yard sale for $4 because he thought the frame looked kinda nice. Not the art, the frame. The actual painting, in his expert opinion, was basically attic wallpaper. His grand plan was to remove the canvas, toss it, and reuse the wood. But before committing artistic homicide, a friend suggested he have it checked out, mostly because destroying random old paintings feels like the kind of thing that ends up on the History Channel. Turns out, the ugly old picture was an original 18th century work by a minor European master that had vanished for decades. Auction houses practically levitated. That $4 purchase sold for over $900,000. Imagine trying to explain that to people at work. So how'd you make your fortune? Oh, I almost threw it in the trash. While some people spend years networking, earning MBAs, and optimizing portfolios, this guy won capitalism because he was cheap and mildly decorative. Interior design almost made him poor. Laziness made him rich. 4. A mechanic from Arizona once bought a rusty motorcycle at auction because he wanted spare parts. Not a collector's dream. Not a luxury purchase. Just greasy metal he planned to cannibalize like some suburban Frankenstein. The bike barely ran, looked like tetanus on wheels, and came with old saddlebags full of junk. But while digging through one of the bags, he found several weathered documents, military papers, and an original handwritten note linking the motorcycle to a famous World War II dispatch rider. Suddenly, his busted bargain bin bike wasn't scrap. It was a historically significant collector's item. Restoration experts got involved. Historians got excited. Wealthy enthusiasts began waving checkbooks around like caffeinated auction paddles. He eventually sold it for over $600,000. The man literally went shopping for spare bolts and accidentally purchased a museum piece. Henry Ford would probably weep. It's one of history's greatest reminders that sometimes treasure hunting doesn't require maps, clues, or adventure. Sometimes it just requires low standards and a willingness to buy rust. 5. In the early days of mobile apps, one exhausted office worker was so annoyed by his snoring roommate that he spent a weekend creating a simple white noise app to drown out the nightly chainsaw impression happening across the hall. He wasn't trying to innovate. He wasn't dreaming of Silicon Valley glory. He just wanted 8 consecutive hours without sounding like he lived inside a diesel engine. Half asleep and fueled by cheap coffee, he uploaded the app with generic rain sounds, a fan setting, and one accidental bug that mixed ocean waves with static in a strangely soothing way. Users loved it. Insomniacs, stressed parents, college students, and apparently half of America downloaded it. His accidental broken sound became the app's signature feature. Within 2 years, he'd earned millions through subscriptions and licensing. This man didn't disrupt an industry. He monetized sleep deprivation and a roommate who sounded like an angry walrus. Somewhere, his former roommate deserves royalties for involuntary breathing. 6. In the glorious chaos of the 1980s, one Ohio dad bought what he thought was a dusty box of baseball cards at a garage sale for $20, mostly because it came with a free tackle box, and he enjoyed pretending he'd someday organize his tools. This was peak suburban logic. Buy junk, justify it later. The cards looked ancient, smelled like basement, and had probably survived 3 Nixon administrations. He nearly handed them to his kids, who were one sugar rush away from bicycles spoking them into destruction. But while flipping through the stack during a Sunday football game, he noticed one card looked suspiciously old, like before television. Old. Turns out, it was an ultra-rare 1909 Honus Wagner card, the cardboard equivalent of finding Elvis working at Sears. That accidental purchase eventually sold for over $2 million. The man wasn't an investor. He was just another guy wandering yard sales in tube socks, trying to avoid Home Depot. Wall Street has analysts. Real wealth apparently lives between rusted fishing lures and old Tupperware. 7. A New Jersey woman in the 90s bought an ugly ceramic bowl at a flea market because it matched her kitchen wallpaper, which already sounds like a design crime punishable by HGTV intervention. She paid $3, took it home, and proudly used it to hold potpourri, the official scent of every aunt's bathroom from 1987 to 1999. For years, this bowl sat quietly collecting dried flowers and dust until an antiques appraiser nearly swallowed his mustache. The decorative bowl was actually a rare Chinese artifact from the Ming Dynasty worth nearly $2.4 million. This woman had unknowingly used a museum-grade treasure as a glorified pine cone container. Somewhere, art historians fainted in synchronized agony. She didn't uncover treasure through scholarship, excavation, or global adventure. She found it because her taste in kitchen decor accidentally aligned with imperial history. Indiana Jones fought Nazis for relics. Linda from Paramus found one next to a lamp shaped like a duck. 8. In 1976, a retired mailman in Florida bought a storage locker because America has always loved gambling, especially when disguised as practical purchasing. He was hoping for tools, maybe a lawnmower, perhaps something useful enough to brag about during barbecue season. Instead, he found boxes of old comic books so neglected they looked like they'd been stored by raccoons. His first instinct was to toss them, because grown men in the 70s weren't exactly encouraged to preserve superhero memorabilia unless they wanted neighborhood judgment. But among the pile sat pristine first edition Marvel comics, including early Spider-Man and Fantastic Four issues. The collection sold for over $3 million. This man literally stumbled into retirement riches because someone else forgot to pay storage fees. Financial planners will tell you about IRAs, compound interest, and disciplined portfolios. Meanwhile, this guy got wealthy by opening a garage-sized mystery box like a blue-collar game show contestant. Superman saves people. Spider-Man paid for this guy's boat. 9. One Texas trucker bought an old oil rights contract at an estate sale because he liked the leather folder it came in. Not the paperwork, the folder. The actual documents seemed about as exciting as expired warranties and old tax receipts, which is exactly why they were ignored by everyone else. But after years of the folder sitting in his garage under fishing gear and enough extension cords to power Nebraska, a landman friend noticed the paperwork referenced forgotten mineral rights on property no one had touched in decades. Then modern drilling technology arrived like capitalism on steroids. The land was suddenly valuable, and those worthless rights transformed him into a multi-millionaire practically overnight. He didn't strike oil. He bought paperwork because he thought the binder looked sturdy. The Beverly Hillbillies needed a bubbling crude geyser. This guy needed garage clutter and low expectations. It's comforting to know the American dream can still be achieved through accidental paperwork hoarding. 10. In pure 1990s fashion, one office secretary from Chicago joined a company wellness challenge mostly because the grand prize was a color TV, which at the time was still serious motivation for adults raised on rabbit ears and static. She absent-mindedly filled out a side raffle ticket at the event, assuming her odds were roughly equal to being abducted by Pat Sajak. But due to a printing error, her raffle entry was actually processed into an international sweepstakes tied to an unclaimed promotional jackpot. She didn't win a television. She won $11 million. Imagine showing up hoping for better reception during Wheel of Fortune and leaving with private island money. Her coworkers were understandably thrilled in the same way people are thrilled when Dave from accounting gets abducted by success. She became rich not through innovation, hard work, or strategy, but because corporate paperwork malfunctioned harder than a fax machine in Y2K. Some people climb ladders, others trip over office bureaucracy and land on piles of cash. 11. A California surfer bought a battered old Volkswagen van in the early 2000s because it screamed midlife crisis on a budget. It barely ran, smelled like wet dog and incense, and looked like it had transported exactly 6 failed garage bands. While ripping out moldy interior panels to make it less tetanus adjacent, he discovered hidden artwork tucked behind insulation. Not posters, not doodles. Original sketches linked to a famous 1960s rock photographer who'd used the van during concert tours. After authentication, collectors lost their minds harder than Beatles fans in 1964. The sketches and memorabilia sold for millions. This man didn't restore a classic vehicle. He accidentally purchased a rolling Woodstock attic. He was one rust patch away from owning nothing but regret, yet somehow ended up financially transformed because an old hippie van was secretly a time capsule. Most used cars lose value the second you drive them off the lot. This one apparently came with backstage passes and a retirement plan. 12. In one of the most aggressively American stories ever, a Nevada casino janitor picked up a discarded slot machine voucher in 2003 because he assumed it might cover lunch. We're talking maybe a sandwich, maybe gas station coffee, maybe enough for pie if life got wild. Instead, thanks to a machine malfunction and an accounting loophole that sounded like Vegas wearing clown makeup, the ticket was tied to an unclaimed progressive payout worth $17 million. At first, management thought there'd been a mistake, which is rich coming from a city built on carpet patterns designed by fever dreams. But after legal reviews, they had to pay. The man became an instant millionaire because he picked up litter. Not entrepreneurship, not investing, not hustle culture. He literally cleaned up trash and won bigger than most people who actually played. Las Vegas spent decades proving the house always wins, then accidentally made janitorial work look like a viable financial strategy. 13. In 1983, a middle-aged guy from Wisconsin bought an old metal detector at a church rummage sale for $15 because, like millions of dads in tube socks, he believed owning random equipment automatically qualified as a hobby. This was the golden age of suburban optimism, when men bought gadgets, used them twice, and stored them next to paint cans for eternity. Testing it out in his own backyard, mostly to justify the purchase to his wife, he got a bizarrely strong signal near his septic tank. Romantic already. Expecting rusty nails or maybe a forgotten wrench, he dug up a buried coffee can stuffed with rare gold coins dating back to the 1800s, likely hidden by a previous homeowner during the Great Depression. The haul sold for over $1.8 million. This man didn't hunt ancient ruins or decode pirate maps. He got rich because he impulse bought yard equipment and accidentally excavated his lawn like a financially confused gopher. Indiana Jones had temples. Bob had a septic field and New Balance sneakers. 14. A divorced accountant in Phoenix once purchased a cheap framed landscape painting at Goodwill because the frame perfectly matched his den, which was decorated in what can only be described as recently separated man trying his best. The art itself looked like motel wallpaper. Forgettable trees, suspiciously sad lake, probably haunted geese. He planned to toss the painting and keep the frame, but while removing the backing, he discovered a folded original Declaration-era military commission signed by George Washington. Not a replica, not a souvenir. The actual kind of document historians would tackle each other over. Auction houses went absolutely feral, and the piece sold for millions. Imagine becoming wealthy because your interior decorating standards were low enough to shop like a raccoon with coupons. This wasn't historical scholarship. This was accidental patriotism through discount home decor. Somewhere, founding fathers are either honored or deeply confused that American treasure preservation now depends on bachelor furniture choices. 15. During the Beanie Baby insanity of the 1990s, when otherwise rational adults were treating stuffed animals like retirement bonds, a woman in Missouri accidentally bought the wrong Princess Diana bear at a swap meet. She thought she was overpaying for a common plush toy because everyone in America briefly lost their collective minds. But due to a factory error involving unique stitching and tag misprints, her purchase turned out to be one of the rarest versions ever produced. Years later, while cleaning out a closet full of denim jackets and broken VCR cables, she discovered collectors were willing to pay staggering sums. That cute purple mistake sold for nearly $500,000. For context, this is a society where teachers begged for supplies, while polyester pellet bears became speculative assets. She didn't master markets. She survived toy hysteria and forgot to donate a stuffed animal. Warren Buffett studied economics. Carol from St. Louis won because Ty accidentally sneezed during manufacturing. 16. A construction worker in Pennsylvania bought a dilapidated farmhouse because it was cheaper than renting and came with character, which is realtor language for serious mold, but congratulations. While demolishing a rotting wall, he discovered stacks of vintage comic books used as insulation, because apparently previous owners believed Superman's highest calling was draft prevention. Most were from the 1930s and 1940s, including Action Comics issues worth obscene amounts to collectors. Instead of asbestos and disappointment, his walls were lined with retirement. The collection eventually brought in several $1,000,000. Think about that. Generations of people lived inches away from life-changing wealth while complaining about heating bills. This man didn't flip real estate through genius. He got lucky because old-timey penny pinchers insulated with future auction gold. HGTV teaches renovation strategy. This house basically said, punch drywall, meet Batman. 17. In one of America's finest examples of bureaucratic nonsense accidentally paying off, a postal worker in Michigan received a junk mail envelope labeled as a sweepstakes scam and almost tossed it straight into the recycling bin beside his expired Radio Shack catalogs. But boredom, that great engine of destiny, made him open it during lunch. Turns out, due to a promotional filing error, he'd legitimately won a commercial real estate giveaway tied to a nationwide mall campaign. Not coupons, not a blender, a shopping plaza stake. Initially assuming this was corporate nonsense on par with, "You may already be a winner," he nearly ignored the paperwork entirely. Within a decade, that ownership share ballooned into millions as suburban retail exploded like khaki shorts at a Memorial Day sale. He became wealthy because direct mail, the same thing responsible for half of America's paper waste, finally delivered something besides pizza coupons and false hope. For decades, people mocked junk mail. Then one envelope basically said, "Congratulations, your trash is now passive income." 18. A retired schoolteacher in Oregon bought an old upright piano for $200 because she wanted her grandchildren to experience culture, discipline, and the same forced musical resentment generations endured before iPads. The piano was ancient, out of tune, and looked like it had survived both world wars and at least one bourbon problem. During restoration, the tuner discovered hidden compartments packed with rare bearer bonds and antique currency concealed inside by the original owner, likely during an era when banks inspired about as much confidence as gas station sushi. Adjusted for value, the stash was worth several $1,000,000. This woman thought she was purchasing family enrichment and maybe a few awkward Christmas recitals. Instead, she bought a musical treasure chest. Mozart wrote symphonies. This piano mostly sat in silence until it financially uppercut everyone involved. It turns out the best instrument for building wealth wasn't stocks, real estate, or entrepreneurship. Apparently, it was buying grandma's creepy piano and hoping capitalism falls out. 19. In 2001, a bored airport baggage handler in Dallas bought an abandoned suitcase at an unclaimed luggage auction because it was Samsonite. and that alone felt classy enough for a man whose vacation plans peaked at roadside motels. Inside, he expected clothes, maybe cheap souvenirs, perhaps somebody's regrettable Hawaiian shirt collection. Instead, he found vintage jewelry, undeveloped celebrity photographs from the 1960s, and signed memorabilia tied to Hollywood royalty. The contents became collector gold, eventually selling for enough money to make first-class passengers suddenly seem less smug. This man didn't network with elites, inherit wealth, or manifest abundance. He bought forgotten luggage like a discount game show contestant and accidentally stumbled into celebrity archaeology. For years, airlines proved they could lose your belongings with astonishing efficiency. In this case, they just happened to lose someone else's fortune directly into a baggage handler's retirement plan. Somewhere, a rich socialite misplaced pearls. Somewhere else, Gary from Dallas said thanks. 20. In the mid-1980s, a recently laid-off factory worker in Indiana did what countless Americans did when life got weird. He bought a vending machine at a government surplus auction because it was cheap, vaguely practical, and sounded like the kind of thing a man with a mustache could proudly own. His dream, maybe passive income from candy bars and off-brand cola. What he actually bought was an old machine from a shuttered casino lounge that had never been fully emptied. While repairing the coin jam, he discovered hidden compartments crammed with thousands of silver coins, rare casino tokens, and collectible currency. Apparently forgotten during some Reagan-era accounting disaster. The contents were worth millions to collectors and precious metal dealers. This man did not reinvent himself. He did not pivot careers. He bought a glorified snack dispenser and accidentally inherited Vegas leftovers. Somewhere, financial advisors were explaining diversified portfolios while this guy got rich because a vending machine had commitment issues. Capitalism has spreadsheets. Luck apparently takes quarters. 21. A Tennessee grandmother in 1994 bought a patchwork quilt at a rural estate sale for $40 because it reminded her of something her aunt might have made while watching Murder, She Wrote. It wasn't trendy. It wasn't glamorous. It was just cozy, slightly dusty, and aggressively grandmother approved. For years, it lived folded over a guest room bed no one used except relatives who overstayed holidays. Then a textile historian visiting for Thanksgiving, as one casually does, noticed unusual stitching patterns hidden in the fabric. Turns out the quilt had been sewn using fragments of rare pre-Civil War political campaign banners and historically significant abolitionist materials. In simpler terms, Grandma had been tucking in visitors under museum-grade Americana. The piece eventually sold for several $1,000,000. She didn't speculate on markets, chase trends, or understand collectibles. She literally got rich because she liked a blanket. Silicon Valley created apps. Grandma weaponized betting. It's deeply comforting to know American history can still be discovered one guest room at a time. 22. In 2007, a bored plumber from New Jersey bought a rusty safe at a police auction because, in his words, it looked mysterious, which is exactly how horror movies begin and financial miracles occasionally happen. He imagined maybe old paperwork, perhaps a revolver, possibly enough loose change for a decent steak dinner. What he found after finally cracking it open in his garage, with tools, profanity, and the determination of a man avoiding actual plumbing jobs, was a stash of rare diamonds, gold certificates, and bearer bonds connected to a long-forgotten robbery from the 1920s. Because ownership laws had become a bureaucratic labyrinth only America could produce, and no legitimate heirs surfaced, much of the fortune legally became his. Overnight, a guy whose previous big purchase was probably a lawn tractor became obscenely wealthy by impulse buying a giant metal box. Most people find disappointment in old safes. He found generational wealth and enough plot twists for a Scorsese film. The lesson: sometimes reckless curiosity is just treasure hunting with worse planning. 23. In what may be the most gloriously American financial accident ever recorded, a struggling electrician in Nevada attended a tax lien auction in 2010 because he thought he was bidding on a storage shed. Not land, not property rights, a shed. Something to hold tools, Christmas decorations, and the broken exercise equipment every middle-aged man swears he'll fix someday. Thanks to legal jargon written in what appears to be bureaucratic hieroglyphics, his modest bid actually secured ownership rights to several neglected acres of desert property nobody wanted. At least, nobody wanted it. until a major corporation discovered one of the largest lithium deposits in the region sitting directly underneath it, right as the electric vehicle boom exploded harder than late-night infomercial promises. Within a few years, his accidental shed purchase transformed into a deal worth over $50 million. This man did not predict markets, study geology, or mastermind wealth. He basically misread paperwork and tripped face first into the future of global energy. Warren Buffett reads annual reports. This guy accidentally clicked buy now on a dirt patch and became the hillbilly king of rechargeable batteries. Which accidental genius was dumbest? Misclick millionaire, couch cash king, or shed emperor?